The black maid identified a forged ledger in seconds, and the mafia boss halted the entire operation instantly. Jasmine Carter had been working for Dominic Romano for 6 months, and in that time, she had grown used to being invisible. As a maid in one of the most luxurious mansions in the city, she kept her head down, did her job, and stayed out of the way of the powerful man she served. Dominic, known as one of the most influential figures in the underworld, was the kind of person who commanded respect without saying a word. But for Jasmine, it was always about surviving. She wasn't here for power or prestige. She was here to earn her living, to provide for herself and her family. She had learned to keep a low profile, never getting involved in the affairs of the family or the business that ran the mansion. Her job was simple: clean, organize, and do it without ever being noticed. That's how she stayed safe. But today, things were different. Jasmine was sorting through the books in the office, an ordinary task she had done countless times before. However, this time something stood out to her. As she flipped through the ledger, one particular entry caught her eye. A series of numbers didn't add up, a small discrepancy hidden in the middle of a page. Jasmine's eyes narrowed as she quickly scanned the document again, her heartbeat quickening. The numbers were off, and she knew it immediately. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a forgery. She had no idea why or how it was there, but Jasmine knew she couldn't ignore it. Her instincts screamed at her to do something. But what? What could a maid like her do in a situation like this? She could just let it go, pretend she hadn't seen it, and continue on with her life. But that wasn't who Jasmine was. She had always been smart, more than capable of figuring things out. She couldn't walk away from this, not when it was so clear that something was wrong. Jasmine's hands shook slightly as she placed the ledger back on the desk, her mind racing. She had to act fast. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, and Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She quickly stood up and straightened her uniform, hoping it wasn't too obvious that she had found something out of place. The door to the office creaked open, and there he was, Dominic Romano. Jasmine froze. She had seen him countless times, always commanding, always in control. But now, as he stood in the doorway, his presence felt different. There was something in his gaze, something that made her feel exposed. Jasmine's pulse raced. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. Without thinking, she spoke. "Sir," she said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "This ledger, it's been forged." Dominic's eyes flickered with surprise, his usual composure slipping for just a moment. He took a step forward, his gaze shifting to the document on the desk. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Jasmine didn't flinch. "I've seen enough of these ledgers to know when something doesn't add up. The numbers are wrong. It's a fake." She watched as Dominic's expression shifted, his face hardening. There was a moment of silence as he processed her words, and Jasmine could feel the weight of his gaze. Then, without a word, he turned and walked to the phone on the desk. He picked it up and dialed a number. "Cancel everything," he said, his voice cold. "We're stopping the operation." Jasmine couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. The most powerful man in the room, the one who had ruled this mansion with an iron fist, had just stopped everything because of her. He looked at her, his gaze softer now, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You did good," he said quietly. Jasmine nodded, still in shock. She had just changed everything, and she didn't even fully understand how. But one thing was clear: her life was never going to be the same again. The door closed behind Dominic with a soft click, leaving Jasmine alone in the vast, opulent office. Her heart was still racing, her breath shallow. What had just happened? She had barely managed to process the magnitude of what she'd done. A moment ago, she had been a quiet, invisible maid, doing her job in the shadows. Now, she had stopped one of the most powerful operations in the city, simply by pointing out a discrepancy in a ledger. The weight of the situation pressed on her chest. She could feel her palms still damp with sweat, her mind spinning. What would happen next? Dominic had been calm, almost eerily so, when he'd instructed his people to halt everything. But what did that mean for her? Would he be grateful? Would he see her as an asset, or was she just another pawn in his game? Jasmine had no answers. She was just trying to survive, to make it through another day. But now, everything had changed. She glanced around the office, taking in the lavish furnishings, the polished mahogany desk, the gold-framed paintings, the thick carpets beneath her feet. It was all a world away from the life she had come from. She had worked as a maid in high-end homes before, but this mansion, with its wealth and power, was different. She had kept her head down, her interactions limited to polite exchanges with the other staff. She had always known that the less attention she attracted, the safer she would be. But now, for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just a ghost in the background. She had made a difference. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She turned quickly, surprised. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, his face familiar, though she had never spoken to him directly. It was one of Dominic's right-hand men. "Miss Carter," he asked, his tone polite but firm. "Mr. Romano requests your presence in the study." Jasmine's stomach fluttered. It was the first time in all her months here that Dominic had specifically asked for her. She had no idea what to expect. With a slight nod, she followed the man down the corridor, her mind racing with possibilities. The mansion was silent, the kind of silence that only wealth and power could create. It felt like a living thing, heavy with secrets. As they reached the study, the man paused and looked at her. "He'll be waiting for you inside," he said, his voice almost casual, though his eyes betrayed a hint of respect. Jasmine hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The study was even grander than the rest of the mansion, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, rich leather chairs, and a large desk at the far end of the room. Dominic was sitting behind it, his back to the door, his posture relaxed, yet there was an unmistakable air of authority around him. He didn't turn as she entered, but his voice, low and calm, broke the silence. "Close the door, please." Jasmine did as she was asked, her movements almost mechanical. She had no idea what was coming, but she could feel the tension building between them. Finally, Dominic turned to face her. "You've done something very interesting today, Jasmine," he said, his voice steady. But there was an underlying tone she couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger or frustration. Rather, it was a kind of quiet admiration. Jasmine shifted nervously, unsure of how to respond. I just noticed a mistake, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A forgery in the ledger." Dominic leaned forward, his sharp eyes studying her carefully. "A mistake," he repeated, his gaze never leaving hers. "You were the one who saw it." It wasn't a question, but Jasmine felt compelled to answer anyway. "Yes, sir. She paused, suddenly self-conscious. "I've worked with numbers before. I could tell something wasn't right." Dominic raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "And you knew it was a forgery in seconds." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the surface of the desk. "You must be more than just a maid." Jasmine felt a flush rise to her cheeks. She had always tried to stay unnoticed, but now, Dominic's attention felt like a weight on her. She wasn't sure if she wanted it or feared it. "I just do my job, sir." Dominic's eyes softened, just for a moment, before the familiar hard edge returned. "You did more than your job today, Jasmine. You saved me from a disaster. You've given me something very valuable, information I didn't have." Jasmine's heart raced. She had only been trying to help, to do what was right. She never imagined it would lead to this. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Dominic interrupted, his voice surprisingly gentle. "What you did today was invaluable. You've proven that you're not just another piece in my operation. You're someone who can think, who can see things others miss. And that's something I respect." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Jasmine was still processing what he had said when Dominic stood up, walking around the desk toward her. His presence filled the room, and for the first time, Jasmine felt the full weight of his power. He stopped just a few feet away from her, his eyes searching hers. "I don't trust many people, Jasmine," he said, his voice low. "But I trust you, and I want you to be more than just a maid here. I want you to be part of something bigger." Jasmine swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had never been part of something bigger. She had always kept her head down, staying out of the way. This was the life she had chosen, and it had kept her safe. But Dominic's words made her wonder if there was more she could do, more she could become. What do you mean, sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic smiled, though it was more a sharp, calculating smile than one of warmth. "I'm giving you a choice. You can keep doing what you've been doing, working in the background, invisible. Or you can step into the light, Jasmine. And I'll make sure that light shines on you." Jasmine's mind raced. This was a crossroads. This was a choice she never thought she'd have to make. But as she looked at Dominic, something inside her shifted. She had spent so long hiding, so long being invisible. Maybe it was time to step forward. She looked up at him, her voice steady. "I'll step into the light, sir." Dominic's eyes glinted with approval. "Good," he said. "I knew I could count on you." And in that moment, Jasmine realized that her life was about to change forever. The days following Jasmine's decision to step into the light felt like a blur. At first, she wasn't entirely sure what it meant, what it would look like. She had gone from being invisible to being noticed, but what did that really mean in a world like this? Dominic had made it clear that she had a choice, and she had chosen to embrace the unknown, to stop hiding. But every time she entered the mansion, she could feel the eyes of the other staff on her, the whispers behind her back. She had never been in the spotlight, and it felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Dominic had kept his word, as he always did. A few days after their conversation, he had summoned her again, this time to his private office, a space she had never entered before. The door opened with a soft click, and she stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. Dominic was there, sitting behind his desk, but this time, there was something different about the way he looked at her. There was no distance, no formality. He was looking at her like she was no longer just a maid. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever he had planned next, but she was about to find out. "Jasmine," Dominic said, his voice steady but with an edge of something she couldn't quite place. "I've been thinking about what you did for me." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the surface of the desk. "You didn't just save my operation. You showed me something I didn't know I was missing, someone who could think on their feet, someone who could spot a problem before it became a disaster." Jasmine stood there, unsure how to respond. She hadn't expected praise, not from someone like him. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly, her voice a little unsteady. Dominic's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "I need someone who can handle the things I don't see, Jasmine. I've been in this business for a long time, but even I can't keep track of everything." He paused, watching her closely. "That's where you come in. I'm offering you a position, no longer just as a maid, but as part of my inner circle. I need someone I can trust, someone who will help me run things when I can't be everywhere at once." The words hit her like a wave. She had never imagined this kind of offer, not from someone like Dominic, not from someone with his power and reputation. But there it was, right in front of her, an opportunity to be more than she ever thought possible. "I understand, sir," she said, her voice a little more confident now. Dominic nodded, pleased with her response. "I'm giving you access to everything, Jasmine. You'll be the one who handles the details, the things that most people overlook. I want you to help me manage the flow of information, the day-to-day operations. You'll work directly with me." Jasmine's mind raced. She had always dreamed of something more, but now that the opportunity was right in front of her, she wasn't sure if she was ready. It wasn't just about the power or the position, it was about the responsibility. She had always been content to stay in the background, to let others take charge. But now, she had a chance to step forward. The thought terrified her, but at the same time, it filled her with a strange sense of purpose. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice steady now. Dominic smiled, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know you won't. I've seen enough to know you're capable. But there's one thing I need you to understand, Jasmine. This world we live in, it's not easy. There are people who will try to take advantage of you. People who will see you as nothing more than a pawn. But you need to remember one thing, you're not a pawn. You're a player in this game now." Jasmine's heart beat faster as she absorbed his words. She had always known that the world she had entered was dangerous, but hearing it from Dominic made it feel all the more real. She wasn't just stepping into a new role, she was stepping into a world where power and trust were the most valuable commodities. "I won't forget," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. Dominic nodded again, a small, approving smile curling on his lips. "Good. Now, I want you to start tomorrow. I'll have you meet with my team, the ones who run the logistics. You'll start learning everything. This is your new life, Jasmine. Don't waste it." She nodded, her mind racing with everything she had just heard. This was it, her chance to change everything. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was part of something bigger now, and there was no turning back. As she left the office, she could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, and for the first time, she wasn't sure whether to be afraid or proud. All she knew was that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, papers, and new responsibilities. Jasmine had become more than just a maid in Dominic's eyes. She was now part of his inner circle, trusted with tasks and details that most of the staff couldn't even imagine. Every day, she found herself getting more involved in the operations of the mansion and the business that ran beneath it. She spent hours in meetings, learning the intricacies of the family's financial dealings, the undercurrents of power that Dominic navigated every day. But with each new layer of the world she uncovered, Jasmine began to feel a weight on her shoulders. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a new life, one that came with expectations she wasn't sure she was ready to meet. Dominic's presence was ever present in the mansion. His reputation loomed large over everything. He was always in control, always calculating, always watching. Jasmine, for the first time, felt like she was constantly being tested. She had earned his trust, but she knew she had to prove herself every single day. It wasn't just about doing the job. It was about doing it flawlessly, without question. There was no room for mistakes in this world. One afternoon, as she sat in the study reviewing some documents, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. "Jasmine," he said, his voice calm, "I need you to come with me." She stood up quickly, feeling a rush of nerves. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. Dominic led her down a hallway she hadn't ventured down before. It was quieter here, away from the bustling parts of the mansion. The atmosphere was different, more intimate, more personal. He opened a door at the end of the hall, and Jasmine stepped inside. It was a small, private room, not much bigger than a study, with a large window that looked out over the garden. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward a chair. Jasmine obeyed, her mind racing. What was this about? Dominic closed the door behind him and walked over to the desk, where several papers were spread out. He picked one up and turned to face her. "I've been thinking," he began, his gaze intense, "about your future here. You've shown me a lot, Jasmine. You've proven that you're more than capable of handling things." He paused, his expression softening for just a moment. "But I want to see if you can handle something else." Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. Was this another test? She had learned that with Dominic. Nothing was ever quite as it seemed. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. He placed the paper down on the desk and walked toward her. "I'm offering you a more permanent role, Jasmine. Something bigger. But it comes with risks. There are things you'll have to do that aren't easy." Jasmine's heart raced. This was the moment. She had worked hard to get to this point, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever he was about to ask. "What kind of risks?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing something. "There are always risks when you're in my world. People will try to take advantage of you, Jasmine. They'll try to use you, manipulate you. But if you can handle it, if you can prove yourself, you'll have more power than you ever imagined." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "But it's not for everyone. Some people can't handle the weight of it." Jasmine swallowed, the weight of his words sinking in. She had come this far, and now she had to decide whether to keep going or to turn back. The world she had stepped into wasn't something she could just leave behind. "I can handle it," she said, her voice unwavering. Dominic studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. "I know you can," he said quietly. "That's why I'm offering you this. You'll be my right hand, Jasmine. You'll have access to everything. Information, resources, connections. But you have to be ready to make hard choices. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to protect what we've built." Jasmine nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't sure exactly what she was getting into, but she knew one thing for certain. This was her chance to change everything. To take control of her life in a way she never thought possible. Dominic's eyes softened, just a fraction. "Good. I'm glad you understand." He turned to the desk and picked up another paper. "There's something else, Jasmine. A task I need you to take care of. It's not easy, but I need you to be the one to handle it." He slid the paper across the desk to her. Jasmine took it, her fingers brushing the edge of the paper. She looked at the name on the top and felt her stomach drop. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic's expression turned serious. "This is a person who's become a problem. We need to deal with it quietly, without drawing attention. You'll be the one to handle it." Jasmine stared at the paper, her mind racing. She had never been involved in anything like this. She had always kept her distance, always stayed in the background. But now, Dominic was asking her to step into the heart of it. She looked up at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Are you sure I'm the right person for this? Dominic's gaze never wavered. I trust you, Jasmine. You've earned that trust, and I know you can do this. Jasmine took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment when she truly became part of Dominic's world. There was no turning back now. She was in. I'll handle it, she said, her voice steady. Dominic nodded, satisfied. Good. I knew I could count on you. As she left the room, the weight of the task ahead pressed on her shoulders. But for the first time since stepping into this world, Jasmine felt a strange sense of power. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a player in this game now, and there was no going back. The task Dominic had given Jasmine was both daunting and exhilarating. She had never expected to find herself in the middle of something like this, let alone be entrusted with handling it herself. The weight of her new responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders as she looked at the document Dominic had handed her. It was a list of names, addresses, and details about a person who had apparently crossed Dominic, and now it was up to her to manage the situation. She had no experience with this kind of work, and yet, Dominic had put his trust in her. He believed she could handle it. The thought made her both proud and terrified. She had always been the quiet observer, the one who stayed in the background, never getting involved in the chaos that swirled around the powerful figures she served. But now, she was about to step into the heart of it. The mansion felt different now. The walls that once seemed like a safe refuge now felt like a cage. There was no turning back. Jasmine knew that once she took this step, she would be forever changed. She had proven her worth to Dominic, but she needed to prove it to herself, too. It was late when she finally left her room and made her way to Dominic's office. The mansion was eerily quiet at night, the only sounds the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant shuffle of staff members finishing their shifts. She paused for a moment outside his door, taking a deep breath. This was it. She knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. Dominic was sitting behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in hand, looking over a stack of papers. He looked up when she entered, his sharp eyes scanning her face. Jasmine, he said, his voice steady. I trust you're ready for this. She nodded, her throat tight. I'm ready. He motioned for her to sit, and she did, the chair creaking slightly under her weight. Good, he said, setting his glass down. I've already made the necessary arrangements. All you need to do now is finalize the details. He pushed the folder in front of her. I know this won't be easy, but you're the only one I trust to get it done right. Jasmine opened the folder, her eyes scanning the information. There were names she recognized, people who worked closely with Dominic, and others she had never heard of. But one name stood out to her. It was a name she hadn't expected to see, and it made her heart skip a beat. The person on the list was someone she had never imagined could be an issue, someone who had been close to Dominic for years. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic's gaze was cold, unflinching. You'll need to handle it, Jasmine. There's no room for hesitation. Jasmine felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just a matter of business anymore. It was personal. But she knew Dominic's world was filled with these kinds of situations where loyalty and power were tested, where sacrifices had to be made. She had chosen this path. She had stepped into this world, and there was no turning back. I understand, she said, her voice steady now, though her mind was racing. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew she had to go through with it. There were no second chances in this world. As she left Dominic's office, the weight of the task ahead pressed down on her. She walked through the empty halls of the mansion, her thoughts swirling with uncertainty. What would happen when she confronted the person on the list? Would she be able to handle it? She didn't know, but she couldn't afford to show any weakness. Dominic was counting on her. The next morning, Jasmine found herself standing outside a small, nondescript building in the city, the address from the file she had been given. The weight of the situation settled back into her chest, but she kept her head high. She was here to do a job, and she would do it. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the pavement. As she approached the door, she hesitated for just a moment. This was her chance to prove herself, to take control of her own destiny. She had always been afraid of stepping into the light, but now she was here, and she was going to make it count. She knocked on the door. The next few minutes felt like hours as she waited, her heart pounding in her chest. When the door finally opened, she was met with a familiar face, one she hadn't expected. The person standing before her was someone she had known for years, someone she had worked alongside. The surprise was written all over his face as he recognized her. "Jasmine?" he asked, his voice shaking. She stood tall, her mind focused. "We need to talk," she said quietly. The room was quiet, and for a moment, it was as if time stood still. Jasmine had stepped into the world of power and deception, and now there was no turning back. The door clicked shut behind Jasmine as she stepped inside the small, dimly lit room. The familiar face before her was both a comfort and a complication. Marcus, one of Dominic's trusted associates, looked at her with a mixture of shock and confusion. His eyes widened as he registered the gravity of the situation. "Jasmine?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Jasmine took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had come here to do one thing, to confront Marcus. The job Dominic had entrusted her with wasn't just about the documents, the names, or the addresses. It was about power, trust, and loyalty. And Marcus, someone she had worked with for years, had broken that trust. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice steady. Marcus stepped back, his face clouded with unease. "Talk about what? What's going on?" Jasmine didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know what you've been doing, Marcus. I know what you've been hiding from Dominic." The words hung heavily in the air between them. Marcus's face drained of color as the realization sank in. What do you mean?" he stammered, his usual confidence slipping away. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jasmine's gaze didn't waver. "Don't play dumb with me. You've been working with the Bratva behind Dominic's back. You've been feeding them information, plotting against him. I've seen the evidence." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his hands twitching at his sides. "Jasmine, you don't understand." "I understand enough," she interrupted. "You've been betraying Dominic, and now I'm here to make sure it stops." Marcus let out a shaky laugh, a nervous edge to his voice. "You think you can just walk in here and, take me down? You're nothing, Jasmine. You're just a maid. You don't have the power to do anything." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. His words were meant to provoke her, but they only made her more determined. "I'm not just a maid anymore, Marcus. And I've got all the power I need." She stepped closer, her posture firm, her presence commanding. "I'm the one who's in charge now, not you." Marcus faltered, his bravado fading as he realized Jasmine wasn't backing down. She could see the panic in his eyes. The walls he had built up around himself were crumbling. "Please, Jasmine," he begged, his voice desperate now. "You don't have to do this. I made a mistake. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I could get away with it." Jasmine looked at him coldly, her heart hardening. "That's the problem, Marcus. You thought you could get away with it. You underestimated Dominic, and you underestimated me." She pulled out the file Dominic had given her, the one with all the evidence against him. She handed it to him, letting him see the full extent of what he had done. "This is what you've done," she said. "This is what you've been hiding from him. But I'm not going to let you get away with it. Not anymore." Marcus's eyes scanned the file, his face pale. His shoulders slumped as the weight of his actions hit him. He had no more excuses, no more lies. He was caught. What are you going to do with this?" he asked, his voice trembling. Jasmine's answer was simple. "I'm going to make sure Dominic sees it. I'm going to make sure he knows what you've been doing." Marcus's face twisted with fear. "No, please," he begged, stepping forward. "I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake. I'll fix it. I'll tell Dominic everything. Just don't." He trailed off, his words falling flat as he realized Jasmine wasn't swayed. "It's too late for apologies, Marcus," Jasmine said, her voice low and unyielding. "You've crossed a line, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences." The silence in the room was thick with tension as Marcus stood frozen, his eyes darting between Jasmine and the file in his hands. He knew there was no way out. He had betrayed the wrong person, and now, Jasmine was the one holding all the cards. As Jasmine turned to leave, she glanced back at him one last time. "You've had your chance," she said quietly. "Now, it's time to face the music." The door closed behind her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jasmine felt the weight of her new role settle around her like a cloak. She wasn't just part of Dominic's world now, she was shaping it. And no one, not even someone like Marcus, was going to stand in her way. She walked down the hallway with a sense of purpose, knowing that this was only the beginning. She had proven herself to Dominic, and now she had to prove to herself that she could handle whatever came next. It was no longer just about survival. It was about power, control, and loyalty. And Jasmine was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The next day, Jasmine found herself standing outside Dominic's office once again. The events of the previous night had settled in her mind, and the weight of her decision was becoming clearer with every passing minute. She had handed over the file containing Marcus's betrayal, and now the aftermath was about to unfold. Jasmine wasn't sure what to expect. Would Dominic be angry? Disappointed? Or would he be impressed by her handling of the situation? She had no idea. But one thing was certain. Things were changing, and she was at the center of it all. She knocked softly before entering, as was customary, and Dominic's deep voice called out to her, "Come in, Jasmine." The door opened, and she stepped inside, her heart racing. Dominic was sitting at his desk, as usual, but there was a different air about him today. He wasn't buried in paperwork as he often was. Instead, his eyes were fixed on her, and his expression was unreadable. For a moment, the silence stretched between them, heavy with anticipation. "You did well, Jasmine," Dominic finally said, breaking the silence. His words were calm, but there was an edge to them that told Jasmine he wasn't finished yet. "I've read the file." He motioned to the folder on his desk, the one she had given him the night before. Jasmine nodded, though she didn't speak. Her nerves were on edge, but she kept her composure. "I didn't expect you to handle it like this," Dominic continued, his tone shifting slightly. "Most people in your position would have been too afraid to step up. But you didn't hesitate. You acted quickly and efficiently." Jasmine swallowed, trying to steady her breath. She wasn't sure if she should feel proud or fearful. Dominic's praise was unexpected, but it didn't make the situation any less intense. "I just did what I thought was right, sir," she said softly. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the edge of the desk thoughtfully. "Right. And that's what I like about you. You don't let fear control you. You act on your instincts. That's the kind of person I need in my organization." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was the moment she would finally know where she stood. "But you should know, Jasmine," Dominic continued, his gaze unwavering, "that trust in this world doesn't come without a price. People will test you. They will try to manipulate you. They will try to break you. And you will have to decide, time and time again, where your loyalty lies." Jasmine nodded. She had known that trust was a fragile thing in this world. She had seen enough of Dominic's world to understand how easily it could be shattered. But she also knew that she wasn't the same person she had been when she first entered this mansion. She had changed, and she was ready for whatever came next. "I understand, sir," she said, her voice steady. Dominic studied her for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "Good," he said finally. "Because you're about to be tested again." Jasmine frowned slightly, her mind racing. What did he mean? "What do you mean?" she asked. Dominic's expression hardened. "There's been another situation that requires your attention. A delicate one, and I need you to handle it." Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of situation?" she asked cautiously. Dominic slid a manila folder across the desk toward her. "This is a person who's been trying to undermine my business. They've been feeding information to our competitors, and it's only a matter of time before they make a move. I need you to deal with it. Quietly. Efficiently." Jasmine took the folder, her fingers brushing against the paper. She opened it slowly, scanning the contents. The name on the first page was familiar, someone she had seen around the mansion, someone she had spoken to on several occasions. "Why me?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why not one of your other associates?" Dominic's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Because, Jasmine, you've proven that you can think on your feet. You don't get bogged down by emotions or loyalty. You do what needs to be done. And that's exactly what I need right now." Jasmine's stomach turned. This wasn't just another assignment. This was personal. She had never been asked to handle something like this before, to make a decision that could have lasting consequences for someone else's life. But Dominic was right. She had proven herself. And now, she had to follow through. She closed the folder and looked up at him. "I'll handle it, sir," she said, her voice firm. Dominic's lips curled into a small smile, a rare display of approval. "I knew I could count on you." Jasmine felt a weight settle on her shoulders, but it wasn't one she could walk away from. She was part of this world now, and that meant making tough decisions, even when they were hard. As she left Dominic's office, her mind raced with the gravity of the task ahead. She didn't know exactly how she was going to handle this, but she knew she had to make it count. She wasn't just working for Dominic anymore. She was shaping her own destiny, and she would do whatever it took to protect it. As Jasmine left Dominic's office, the weight of her new assignment settled deep in her chest. She had always thought she understood what loyalty meant, what it meant to work for someone like Dominic Romano. But this was different. This was about something more than just doing her job. This was about making decisions that could change someone's life, decisions that she couldn't undo once they were made. The person Dominic had asked her to handle was someone she had worked with closely in the past. Someone who, until now, had been a part of the machinery that kept the mansion running smoothly. And now, that same person was betraying everything they had built. Jasmine's heart raced as she made her way down the hall to the staff quarters. The silence in the mansion felt suffocating, and every step she took seemed to echo in her mind. She had always stayed out of the way, hidden behind her uniform and the quiet routine of cleaning and organizing. But now, she was no longer invisible. She was part of something much bigger. She had no time to waste. As she walked into her small room, she set the folder on the table in front of her. She stared at it for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. She had to act fast. There was no room for hesitation, no room for doubt. She had been given a task, and she had to complete it. The only question was how. Jasmine picked up the folder and opened it once again, scanning the information inside. The person Dominic had asked her to deal with was a man named Andrew Donovan. He had been working with the Romano family for years, handling logistics and keeping things running smoothly. But now, he was feeding information to their competitors, betraying Dominic's trust for personal gain. Jasmine clenched her jaw. This wasn't just about a mistake. It was about loyalty, about the delicate balance of power that held everything together. Andrew had made his choice, and now, Jasmine had to make hers. She thought about the last conversation she had with him. It had been just a few days ago, in the kitchen. He had smiled at her as she served him his coffee, the same friendly smile he always gave. She hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary then. But now, looking at the folder, she saw how naive she had been. She had trusted him, just like everyone else. But trust in this world was fragile. It could be shattered in an instant. Jasmine took a deep breath, closing the folder. She couldn't afford to get emotional about this. She had a job to do, and she would do it. Dominic had trusted her, and she would prove that she was capable of handling the responsibility he had given her. The next morning, Jasmine found herself standing outside Andrew's office. Her hands were clammy, her heart pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed what she would say, but now that the moment was here, she wasn't sure she was ready. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Come in," a voice called from the other side. Jasmine entered, her footsteps steady despite the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her. Andrew looked up from his desk, his usual friendly smile spreading across his face when he saw her. "Jasmine, what's up?" he asked casually. "Can I get you something?" Jasmine stood there for a moment, her mind racing. This was it. She had to act. "I need to talk to you, Andrew," she said, her voice calm but firm. His smile faltered slightly, but he didn't seem alarmed. "Of course," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "What's going on?" Jasmine sat down, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the chair. She couldn't afford to let her nerves show. She had to be strong. "I know what you've been doing," she said, her voice low but steady. Andrew's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, she saw the mask slip. But just as quickly, it was back in place. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice careful. Jasmine didn't flinch. "You've been feeding information to our competitors. You've been betraying Dominic's trust. I know everything." Andrew's face drained of color. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. "You've made a choice, Andrew," she said, her voice hardening. "But now, you have to face the consequences." Andrew stood up suddenly, his hands clenched into fists. "You can't just accuse me of something like that. I've been loyal to this family for years." "Loyal?" Jasmine's voice was cold. "You've been using that loyalty as a cover for your own greed. You thought you could get away with it. But now it's over." She stood up as well, her posture unyielding. "I'm going to take this to Dominic. And when I do, there won't be anything you can do to change it." For a moment, Andrew said nothing. His shoulders slumped as if all the fight had gone out of him. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "I can make it right. I can fix this." Jasmine shook her head. "It's too late for that." She turned and walked toward the door, the weight of the decision settling in her chest. She had done what needed to be done. There was no going back now. As she left Andrew's office, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of satisfaction and regret. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was the life she had chosen, and she would make sure she did it right. As Jasmine walked away from Andrew's office, the weight of the situation still lingered in her chest. She had never imagined that it would come to this, that she would be the one to confront betrayal head-on. She had done what needed to be done, but now, with the path ahead uncertain, doubt crept in. She wasn't sure what would happen once Dominic knew the truth. Would he be pleased with her handling of the situation? Or would he see it as just another test of her loyalty, one that she might not pass? Her thoughts were interrupted as she entered the main hallway of the mansion, where the staff bustled about, doing their daily routines. The sudden normalcy of it all struck her as strange. It was as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. Jasmine's eyes darted to the familiar faces of the staff, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all watching her, wondering what she had just done. She had always kept to herself, working quietly behind the scenes, but now she was part of the world that ran the mansion, part of the intricate web of power that threaded through it. As she passed the dining room, she caught sight of Dominic standing by the window, his back turned to her. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of how to approach him. But then, with a deep breath, she walked toward him. "Dominic," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. His gaze was unreadable, but there was something there, a flicker of recognition, of something unspoken. "Jasmine," he replied, his tone calm. "How did it go?" She paused, the folder in her hand suddenly feeling heavier. "It's done," she said. "I confronted him. He knows that his actions have been exposed." Dominic's eyes never left her, his expression unreadable. "And what did he say?" he asked, his voice low. "He tried to deny it," Jasmine replied, her voice tight. "But I gave him the evidence. He couldn't deny it anymore." Dominic nodded slowly, his gaze never wavering. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. Jasmine blinked, surprised by the praise. She had expected him to be more businesslike, more calculating. But there was something about his tone, something that made her wonder if he was actually acknowledging her as more than just a tool in his operation. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face. "I knew you could handle it," he said, his gaze intense. "You've proven yourself to me, Jasmine. You've earned my trust." Jasmine swallowed hard, her heart beating faster. She had wanted to earn his trust, but now that it was in her hands, she wasn't sure how to hold it. She had never thought of herself as someone who could be trusted, not like this. She had always been in the background, doing the work without questioning. But now, Dominic was giving her something more, something that came with responsibility, with power. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady, though a knot had formed in her stomach. Dominic's eyes softened, just a fraction. "Now, you start to take on more. You'll be the one to handle things when I'm not around. You'll be my right hand, Jasmine." His words hit her like a wave. She had never imagined she would be in this position, never imagined that she would be trusted with this kind of power. But now, it was clear, Dominic was giving her more than just a role. He was giving her control, and that terrified her as much as it excited her. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice firm. Dominic studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I know you won't," he said, his voice low. "You've already proven you can handle this world. You just have to remember one thing. Loyalty is everything. Never forget who you're working for, and never forget what's at stake." Jasmine nodded, absorbing his words. She knew that loyalty was everything in Dominic's world. It was the currency that held everything together, the thing that separated the winners from the losers. And she had chosen to be loyal. She had chosen to stand by his side, no matter what came next. "I won't forget," she said quietly. Dominic gave her a small smile, a rare, genuine smile that sent a strange warmth through her chest. "Good," he said, his voice softening. "Now, I want you to get some rest. You've earned it." Jasmine nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had been running on adrenaline for days, and now that the task was over, the weight of everything she had done settled into her bones. "Thank you," she said softly, before turning to leave. As she walked down the hallway, her mind raced with everything that had just happened. She had made a choice to step into a world of power and deception. But with that choice came a price, and she knew she would have to keep paying it. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. She was no longer just a maid. She was a part of this world now, and there was no going back. The days following Dominic's last conversation with Jasmine felt like a whirlwind. She had been thrust deeper into the world she had once observed from the sidelines. Every task she completed, every decision she made seemed to carry more weight than before. She had expected to feel relieved after taking control of the situation with Andrew, but instead, a heavy sense of responsibility lingered over her. The mansion, once a place of routine and familiarity, now felt like a battleground, one where loyalty, power, and trust were constantly tested. Jasmine had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed out of the way. But now, her every move seemed to matter. She no longer had the luxury of blending into the background. As she walked through the hallways of the mansion, she noticed the subtle shifts in the way people looked at her. The other staff members, who once barely acknowledged her presence, now seemed to treat her with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. They were aware of the change, even if they didn't understand it. It was the same with Dominic. His eyes, when they met hers, no longer held the distance they once did. There was something different in his gaze, a recognition of the person she was becoming. Jasmine couldn't decide if she was ready for this. She wasn't sure if she could handle the weight of the responsibility he had given her. But there was no turning back now. She had crossed a line, and the path ahead was uncertain. One evening, as she sat at her desk in the small office Dominic had set up for her, reviewing documents, the door to the office opened. Jasmine looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his face as unreadable as ever. "Jasmine," he said, his voice calm, but with an edge that caught her attention. "I need you to meet someone." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea who Dominic was referring to, but she could tell from his tone that this was important. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves twisting in her stomach. "A contact of mine," Dominic replied. "Someone who can help us with a situation we've been dealing with. I need you to make sure everything goes smoothly. I trust you to handle it." Jasmine stood up slowly, trying to keep her composure. She had been tasked with handling delicate situations before, but this felt different. "What exactly do I need to do?" she asked, her mind already running through possible scenarios. "You'll meet him at the cafe across town. I'll send you the details. Make sure you're prepared. This isn't just a simple meeting. It's about trust. Your trust in him, and his trust in you." Jasmine nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. This was more than just a meeting. It was a test of her ability to navigate the delicate balance of power that Dominic had taught her to respect. She had to prove that she could handle not just the tasks, but the complexities of this world. That night, as she prepared for the meeting, Jasmine found herself second-guessing everything. She wasn't sure if she had what it took to earn the trust of someone like Dominic. He had placed so much faith in her, but the pressure was starting to weigh on her. She had worked in this world for months now, and she still felt like an outsider. The cafe was small and quiet, tucked away in a corner of the city where few people knew about it. Jasmine walked in, scanning the room for the person she was supposed to meet. She spotted him immediately. He was sitting at a table in the corner, his face hidden by the shadows of the room. He looked up as she approached, his eyes studying her carefully. "Jasmine," he said, his voice low and measured. "I've heard a lot about you." Jasmine sat down across from him, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. "I'm here to handle what Dominic sent me for," she said, her voice steady. The man nodded, his lips curling into a slight smile. "I know, but before we get into that, I need to know if I can trust you." Jasmine met his gaze, refusing to look away. "You can," she said firmly. "Dominic trusts me, and I trust him. That's all that matters." The man studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "Good," he said. "Then let's get down to business." The next few hours were a blur. Jasmine listened carefully as the man explained the details of the situation, his voice calm and methodical. It wasn't an easy task, but she had learned how to navigate these conversations. She asked the right questions, made the right connections, and by the end of it, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had done what Dominic had asked, and she had done it well. As she left the cafe, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had handled herself with confidence, just as Dominic had expected. She was starting to see the truth in his words, that she wasn't just a maid anymore. She was becoming something more. The world she had stepped into was complex, and there were no easy answers. But she had proven to herself that she could thrive in it. And for the first time, Jasmine realized that she wasn't just playing a part in this world. She was shaping it. The next day, as she entered Dominic's office to report back, she felt a sense of purpose that she hadn't had before. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She was making her own decisions, carving her own path. And Dominic, when he looked at her, seemed to see that. "You did well, Jasmine," he said, his voice low but full of approval. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Dominic studied her for a moment before nodding. "I know you are." The following weeks were a blur of responsibility and pressure. Jasmine's role had evolved in ways she hadn't anticipated. What had started as a simple task of assisting with the daily operations in the mansion had transformed into something much larger. Now, she wasn't just managing logistics and handling details. She was involved in every decision that shaped the Romano family's empire. Dominic had put his trust in her, and that trust weighed on her like a heavy cloak. She had proven herself capable, but each new task she was given seemed to carry even higher stakes. One evening, as she sat at her desk reviewing reports, the door to her office opened. She looked up to find Dominic standing there, his expression unreadable as always. "Jasmine," he said, his voice steady. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't unusual for him to call on her, but this time, there was a different intensity in his voice. She stood up, trying to mask the nerves that were starting to form in the pit of her stomach. "What's going on?" she asked. Dominic motioned for her to follow him. Without saying a word, she walked beside him down the hallway, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. They reached a door she hadn't been through before, an office on the second floor that was more secluded than the others. Dominic opened it and stepped inside, and Jasmine followed him. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with large windows overlooking the city. There was a large desk in the center, but it wasn't the furniture that caught Jasmine's attention. It was the man sitting at the desk. His presence immediately put her on edge. He was older than Dominic, his face hard and weathered, but his sharp eyes conveyed a calculating intelligence. "Jasmine, this is Victor," Dominic said, gesturing toward the man. "He's someone I trust, and from now on, you'll be working directly with him." Jasmine's heart raced. She had always been the one behind the scenes, handling the day-to-day tasks. Now, it seemed that Dominic was pulling her into a deeper level of trust, and she wasn't sure if she was ready. Victor stood up and extended his hand. "It's a pleasure, Jasmine," he said, his voice low and commanding. Jasmine shook his hand, her mind racing. She couldn't read him yet, but she knew that Victor was someone to be taken seriously. "We've got a situation that requires both of you," Dominic continued, his tone sharp. "There's been a leak. Someone is passing information to our rivals, and I need you both to handle it." Jasmine's breath caught. Another test. Another challenge. She had thought she was ready for anything, but this was different. This wasn't just about managing the daily tasks anymore. It was about protecting everything they had built. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension building inside her. Dominic turned to Victor, who nodded slightly. "We need to find the source of the leak," Victor said, his eyes never leaving Jasmine's. "And we need to do it quietly. We can't afford any disruptions. People are watching, and if they find out what's really going on, we'll lose control." Jasmine nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about a single betrayal. It was about the stability of the entire operation. And if she didn't do her job right, everything could come crashing down. "What do you need from me?" she asked, focusing on Victor. "We need you to go through the records," Victor explained. "Find out who's been accessing the sensitive files, who's been talking to the wrong people. We'll need you to work quickly, but carefully. This can't be traced back to us." Jasmine's mind worked quickly as she processed the details. She had the skills. She had learned how to sift through data, how to track patterns. But this wasn't just about reading a few records. This was about uncovering the truth, even if it meant exposing someone close to Dominic. Someone who had earned his trust. Understood, she said. Dominic looked at her, his expression unreadable. Good, he said simply. You've been given a responsibility, and I expect you to handle it with the same precision you've shown so far. Don't let anyone get in your way. Jasmine nodded, her heart pounding. This was bigger than anything she had done before. This wasn't just about handling logistics or managing staff. It was about protecting everything Dominic had worked for, everything he had built. As she left the office, she felt a new sense of determination building inside her. She was no longer just a maid. She was an integral part of this world, and she was about to prove that she could handle the responsibility that came with it. The next few days were a whirlwind. Jasmine spent hours going through files, tracking down leads, and piecing together information. She was careful, meticulous, making sure that every detail was in place before taking the next step. It wasn't easy. There were times when the data didn't add up, times when she felt like she was hitting dead ends. But she pushed through, determined to uncover the truth. And then, one evening, she found it. A pattern. A name. Someone who had accessed the confidential files multiple times over the past month. Someone who had been in contact with a rival organization. Jasmine's stomach sank. The person she had uncovered wasn't just a random employee. It was someone who had worked directly with Dominic for years. Someone who had earned his trust. The realization hit her hard. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a personal one. She stood there, staring at the screen, her mind racing. What should she do? She knew Dominic would want her to handle it, to protect their operation. But could she do it? Could she confront someone who had been so close to him? The decision weighed heavily on her, but there was no time to waste. She had to act. She had no choice. Jasmine took a deep breath and picked up the phone. She had the power to change everything. And now, she had to make the hardest decision of her life. The phone felt heavier in Jasmine's hand as she stared at the screen, the name blinking back at her. It was a name she had seen dozens of times before, associated with loyalty, hard work, and dedication to the Romano family. But now, it was the name of a betrayer, a person who had broken the trust that had been built over years. This wasn't just a betrayal of business. This was personal. Jasmine's mind raced. What should she do? She had the evidence, the proof that this person had been working with their rivals. She had the power to expose them, to end their involvement in the operation. But there was more at stake than just business. There was Dominic's trust, the fragile balance of power that kept everything together. She had already made decisions that changed the course of things, but this felt different. This wasn't just about doing what was right. It was about loyalty to Dominic, and to everything he had worked for. She had already proven herself, but this was the ultimate test. With a deep breath, she picked up the phone and dialed Dominic's number. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to pick up. Jasmine. His voice came through, smooth and steady as always. What's the matter? She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. I found something, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Something I think you need to know. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What is it? Dominic asked, his tone shifting slightly, sharp with attention. Jasmine took another breath, summoning the courage she had learned to summon in moments like this. It's about Andrew, she said quietly. I've been going through the records, and I found proof that he's been leaking information to our competitors. He's been working with them for months. She could feel Dominic's presence through the phone, even though he wasn't physically there. His silence told her everything. She waited, knowing that he was processing the information. Are you sure? He finally asked, his voice low. Yes, Jasmine replied. I have the evidence. It's all in the file. There was another pause, longer this time, and Jasmine could hear the faint sound of Dominic shifting in his chair. I'll take care of it, he said, his voice firm. Thank you for bringing it to me. Jasmine's chest tightened at the finality in his tone. Are you going to confront him? She asked, her words hesitant. Dominic's voice softened just slightly. No, you will. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. What? She asked, barely able to process his words. I need you to handle it, Jasmine, he said, his tone now more commanding. You've already proven that you're capable of making the tough decisions. Now this is your final test. I trust you to handle it. Jasmine swallowed, the weight of his words settling in her chest. This was the moment. The task she had feared, the task she had known would come eventually. But now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. But how? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. You've already figured out the truth, Dominic replied. Now, you need to decide what to do with it. Expose him, or make sure he doesn't have the chance to do any more damage. She could feel the intensity of his words, like a pressure building inside her. The decision wasn't just about business. It was about trust, about loyalty, and about the world Dominic had brought her into. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice steady. I'll handle it, Dominic. I won't let you down. She could hear a small sigh of approval on the other end of the line. I know you won't, he said quietly. You've earned my trust, Jasmine. Now, you have to trust yourself. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. The words resonated in her mind. Trust yourself. She had never realized how much trust played a part in this world. It was the foundation of everything. Without it, there was nothing. I'll take care of it, she repeated, more to herself than to him. Good, Dominic said. I'll be waiting to hear from you. The call ended, and Jasmine stood there for a moment, the weight of the task settling in her chest. She had come so far, but this was different. This wasn't just about managing the mansion or making sure things ran smoothly. This was about making a decision that would alter everything. Jasmine turned back to the desk where the file lay open, the name on the top staring back at her. Andrew. She had trusted him. She had worked with him, spoken to him daily. And now, she had to confront him. The thought made her stomach churn, but she knew she had no other choice. She had to be the one to handle it. She had already crossed a line by stepping into Dominic's world. Now, there was no going back. She had to act. She had to trust herself. Taking a deep breath, she closed the file and picked up the phone. The next step would change everything. Jasmine didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who made decisions that affected everything, and she was going to prove that she could handle it. The next day, Jasmine felt the weight of the decision settle deeper into her chest. She had prepared herself mentally for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared her for what was to come. She had to confront Andrew, the man she had once trusted, the man who had been a part of the Romano family for so long. The reality of the situation was clear now. This wasn't just about business. This was about loyalty, betrayal, and the fragile balance of power. Dominic had entrusted her with this task, and now she had to see it through. She had no choice. As she walked toward the door of Andrew's office, her pulse quickened. She had already made her decision, but the uncertainty of what might happen next still lingered in her mind. She knocked softly before entering, and Andrew looked up, his expression guarded. Jasmine, he said, his voice a little too calm, a little too forced. What's this about? Jasmine closed the door behind her, her heart pounding in her ears. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady but firm. Andrew's gaze sharpened, and for a split second, he seemed to hesitate. About what? He asked, his voice barely masking the unease that was starting to creep into his tone. Jasmine stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his. I know what you've been doing, Andrew, she said, her voice calm but unyielding. I know you've been leaking information to our rivals. You've been betraying Dominic's trust. For a moment, there was silence. Andrew's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing as though he was searching for words. Finally, he spoke, his voice faltering. You don't understand. It's not what you think. Jasmine's eyes never left him. It's exactly what I think, she said, her voice low. I've seen the evidence. You've been selling us out. And now, I'm here to make sure it stops. Andrew stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't have the right to accuse me of that, he said, his voice rising, desperation creeping in. I've been loyal to this family for years. You don't know the full story. Jasmine remained calm, her posture unwavering. I know enough. You've crossed a line, Andrew, and there's no going back. Andrew took a step toward her, his eyes wild with panic. You can't just walk in here and ruin everything, he said, his voice shaking. I made a mistake, Jasmine. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to protect myself. Jasmine's gaze hardened. You weren't protecting yourself, Andrew. You were protecting your own interests, your own greed. And now, you've put everything we've worked for at risk. He shook his head, his face crumpling with guilt. I didn't mean to. I never thought it would go this far. Please, Jasmine, you have to understand. Jasmine took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke. I understand perfectly, but understanding doesn't change what's happened. You've betrayed Dominic, and you've betrayed everyone who's trusted you. Andrew's face twisted with regret. I never meant for this to happen. I swear, I never meant to hurt anyone. Please, don't tell Dominic. I'll fix it. I'll make it right. Jasmine shook her head. It's too late for that. You had your chance to fix this. Now, Dominic will know the truth, and you'll have to face the consequences of your actions. For a moment, Andrew stood frozen, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. He had no excuses left. Jasmine had exposed him, and now there was no way out. He knew what was coming. Please, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Don't do this. Jasmine turned to leave, her decision final. I'm not doing anything, Andrew. You've already made your choices. I'm just making sure Dominic knows what you've done. She walked toward the door, the weight of the task settling in her chest. This was the hardest part. She had to let go of the loyalty she once felt for him. She had to do what was necessary for the greater good, even if it meant turning her back on someone she had once trusted. As she left the office, she could feel the tension in her shoulders, the heaviness of the decision she had made. But there was no turning back. She had done the right thing, and now, it was time to face whatever consequences came next. Jasmine walked through the mansion with a new sense of purpose, her mind focused on what lay ahead. She had crossed a line, but in doing so, she had proven that she was ready to take on whatever challenges Dominic's world threw at her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was part of something much bigger, and she would do whatever it took to protect it.